You're listening to the Sunny Days Podcast. I'm your host, Alex the Good Witch, a professional psychic, healer, and coach specializing in subconscious reprogramming, inner child work, and intuition development to help you create your happiest, most fulfilling life. Thank you for tuning in on this sunny day. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sunny Days Podcast. I'm your host, Alex the Good Witch. I am a psychic healer and coach, and I am here with Ellie Rose Pierpoint, also known as Salt of Venus. So I will let her introduce herself to you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ellie, Salt of Venus, just as Alex said, and I'm an astrologer. And I specifically focus on the cycles of Venus and goddess worship so that women can improve their self-worth and create the lives that they want, create the businesses that they want, and have the relationships that they want.
I love it. Awesome. And Ellie has helped me personally, like through her page. I found her from Instagram, and I was just so called to first of all, her just like aesthetic was like so beautiful and like magnetizing. And then her memes were so relatable. And I remember, I've never told you this, but I remember that like when a different like astrology thing was going on and I wanted to learn about it, I would literally like type in your name on Instagram and see like, oh, has she posted about it? Because like I wanted to hear your like take on it to teach me what was going on.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Ellie's work. I've even been in her money mediumship program, which I highly recommend. I even did a testimonial on it. You can check it out. But yeah, today we're gonna talk mostly about the topic of the goddess. As Ellie mentioned, like that is definitely her specialty. And I want to talk about how a lot of us, might view the goddess or maybe feel like inkling towards like goddess work and divine feminine work, but maybe be hesitant for certain reasons. I know that I've had my own journey with it in the past. So those are things that we definitely want to talk about and clear up as well. So, like I mentioned with my journey of, coming to the place where I feel confident and excited to be working like with the goddess, and I feel like that's right for me and comfortable for me. I started being very hesitant about it because one, I was so much not feminine growing up. I would shop in the boys section. I would put my hair up into hats and beanies. And my favorite color was black, and I had flames on everything. So I just like as I was older, even though I presented more in feminine ways, the way that I always saw like the divine feminine being like advertised, it just always seemed like it was kind of the feminine that I wasn't, or maybe it wasn't true to my energy. And then I did have a mentor who ended up getting me into it. And um, a lot of her take on it was a reason that I end up kind of growing out of this mentor, was because I feel like she used a lot of the divine feminine in order to try to like control and manipulate the masculine. It was a lot with like yeah, it was a lot with like partners and relationships and like, you do this a certain way and it like makes this person do that. And I remember, yeah, and there was like very much like strict do's and don'ts that weren't necessarily what I intuitively wanted to do. Like I remember I was dating my now husband, and like I wanted to like talk to him about like my psychic work and like all these things that I do. And he was so interested, and I felt so like accepted that he was interested. And she was telling me that not to do that because the feminine needs to remain a mystery, and that like he can never know those things, and I must always be mysterious about it to like keep the attraction there. And I was like, that just wasn't me. It's okay if like other people are mysterious and like that's their vibe and that's what they want, but I genuinely wanted to have this kind of connection with my partner. And to me, it's like this genuine connection makes me feel like part of the reason why he's like quote unquote the one. So I didn't want to like force me to not do that. But anyway, that's just an example. Now I've gotten very close to the goddess and the divine feminine energy. And yeah, I'd love to open it up to Ellie to get her perspective on kind of the points that I've shared.
Mm. Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Where to start, right? Yeah, so there is a lot of this kind of narrative out there, right? And to me, it kind of comes across as a little bit like the female equivalent of a pickup artist, where it's like you have
Mm-hmm.
to go through these things, and it's like there are like whole forums of men talking about how to pick up women and how to do
Mm-hmm.
this and do this and do this, and it's manipulative, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not authentic. And
Mm-hmm.
so there is a lot of this kind of, I don't know what to call it, strategy
Mm-hmm.
in kind of the I'm going to say divine feminine in quotes, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't really feel like that is actually divine feminine work. I feel like that's more like how to get a high value partner and all this kind of like stuff, right? Where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, be sultry and like don't overshare and let him lead and like all of this stuff. But it's complete. I mean, I don't really see it as like goddess worship.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't know what it is. It's like in its own little in its
Yeah.
own category.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because when you think about it, this narrative of like, oh, let the man lead, be submissive, doesn't actually fit in with what we have as a range of goddesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you went up to goddess Kali and you were like, hey, I'm being told like not to lead and to submit to a man and to not like share myself, she would be like, oh, what, this is not you know this
Yeah.
is not at all aligned with
Mm-hmm.
that goddess, right? And there are so many goddesses, like when we talk about the dark feminine, like Lilith and Inanna and Sekhmet and all of these goddesses that are so powerful, like
Mm-hmm.
so powerful that they can destroy an entire world, and yet we're being told to kind of like sit and look pretty and
Mm-hmm.
not say very much, which
Yeah.
never really sat well with me either.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, so that's my like initial it gives me
Yeah.
the ick.
Mm, yeah, for sure.
that
Like,
that whole
mm,
that whole thing.
yeah. And like what you're saying, like it very much reminds me of like, it's almost more the divine feminine again in quotes, really just being like, let's push us further and further into gender roles.
Right. Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
patriarchal.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like get back in the
Yeah.
kitchen
Yeah.
and be in your divine feminine. And
Exactly. It's so weird because with spirituality, you'd think that we'd be like transcending that and breaking that. And you are when you go into what would be the true like divine feminine and goddess work and things like that. Definitely almost needs like separate names. They're so different. And I can see why me and I'm sure a lot of people are afraid or hesitant to approach it, even if they feel somewhat called, because there's just so
yeah,
many different ways that it's being portrayed, right? So it's about kind of finding
yeah,
the way that's actually that, use the word authenticity, like that authentic way to step into all of that amazing, spiritual power.
yeah. And I think I mean maybe I am helped by the fact that I'm an astrologer, so I
Mhm.
see like that everybody's different anyway, right? So like it might be that really works for somebody, and
Mhm.
for certain people they really like to kind of get into this like sultry kind of like receptive kind of place where that then they are quite submissive and they are like doing all of this kind of work, and maybe that works for them, but it doesn't work for everybody. And
Mhm.
that's kind of where the problem is that it's like being offered as like a blanket for all feminine
Yeah.
creatures. If you behave
Mhm.
like this, you will get this and this. But
Mhm.
as you found, it doesn't work for you, right? And it doesn't work for me either, because it kind of made me feel like yeah, like you have to hide or change certain parts of yourself because
Yeah.
it's not feminine, right? I keep doing these
Mhm.
quote marks. Like
Mhm. Yeah.
um but as we've seen, the feminine is like multifaceted. Like
Mhm.
you can't boil it down into like one thing, really.
Mhm. So, with the feminine being multifaceted, what then to you would be an example or just represent stepping into the feminine versus stepping into all? Like since it's so
Mm-hmm.
multifaceted, what then makes that difference or nuance from, I guess the contrast being like the masculine?
Totally. Yeah, I get that. Like if it's so multifaceted, like what is it, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I think it gets called the mystery a lot. Like when we talk about like the women's mysteries or
Mm.
like being in service to the mystery, because it is kind of almost unknowable. And if you get kind of like really esoteric about it, we're kind of going into like Goddess Kali being like the energy of a black hole. It's chaos, it's the liminal space, it's death and rebirth and everything, right? And you're like, okay,
Yeah.
so how do I like bring that into my life and like actually embody it, right? Because it's very high level esoteric stuff. So for me, I because I mean I've spent a lot of time in India and Nepal and like in Hinduism. So for me, I always come back to this idea of Shakti being like movement and life and vibration. And so when you're in your feminine, you are very much in devotion to life.
Mm.
So, you know, little things that I do, like, you know, every time I drive past the ocean, I say to her that she's beautiful because I see
Oh,
the ocean as like this living thing. And
yeah.
that's kind of like a little kind of way of just being like devoted to life, where it's like,
Mhm.
wow, look at life
Mhm.
here right now in this kind of manifestation,
Mhm.
and look at, you know, look at the movement and the vibration and like everything that is being, and kind of, you know,
Yeah.
like when you move your body, you're like, oh yeah, I'm like inviting in Shakti, I'm inviting in movement, and I'm inviting in life. And so for me, I think being in your feminine is being kind of it very, very aware of life flowing through
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. I'm like so mind blown right now because right before I hopped on here with you, I literally made a note that I wanted to talk about, not even on this podcast, because I honestly didn't think it was relevant. I didn't bridge what you just said. Like you just taught me that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about like animating like things and animating life and like how that's been such like a helpful thing for me, like just like completely what I thought was a separate topic, but that's exactly right. Like to me, like all those things are like alive, you know, like when you say like, hi ocean, you're so beautiful. Like I say that when I go to the ocean, and I say bye every time I leave the ocean, like bye.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and like that's so cool that I literally just randomly thought about like animating things or bringing life to things. We're not bringing it, really just like acknowledging that there is life,
Mm,
you know, through it and in
yeah.
it. Um with that being the feminine. I love it. That makes so much sense. That's so cool.
Mm. Yeah, and then it kind of lends itself to all of the things that come under that, right? Like, so if you've got like honoring life and embodying life as the umbrella term, then underneath that you've got like movement, so embodiment. When you
Mhm.
invite Shakti in and you move and you dance, right? It's incredibly
Yeah.
feminine. That's why
Mhm.
we've had like different kind of like temple dance and belly
Mhm.
dance and like all this kind of exotic dance being very feminine, because movement is the kind of it is the feminine. And then
Yeah.
you've got beauty, and
Mhm.
beauty is also something that is considered to be associated with goddesses and the feminine. And that's kind of like what do we find beautiful? We find nature beautiful, we find
Mhm.
you know, babies beautiful. Like these
Mhm.
are all like life, right? So
Yeah.
I think it is very much a celebration of
Mhm.
life for me
Mhm.
personally.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it. I like okay, you're totally tapping me into the energy right now and like how I feel like that's spot on with like encapsulating how it's so dynamic, you know, and not just like
Mm.
this one note feminine that's really more like gender role. Because you
Uh-huh.
feel that, you know, you feel how like cities are more masculine, but they're very like, you know, tall buildings and cement. It's not movement, you know, and of
Mm-hmm.
course you can find the beauty that comes through, you know, and like different like the feminine energy and the goddess throughout that, but like just the difference between being like at the ocean, you know, or being in nature or being like inside or just staring at like a skyscraper is like very different
Yeah.
energies.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, coming back to Hinduism again, you've got
Mhm.
this concept of Shiva and Shakti, and
Mhm.
so Shiva is meant to be like the witness, and
Mhm.
Shakti is like is movement and creation and vibration. And so when I've been to places that have like a lot of nature, like I live in the jungle right now in
Mhm.
Thailand, and it's so feminine. It's like
Mhm.
there's like butterflies everywhere, there's
Oh.
like leaves, and the sunlight comes through, and it's just like these kind of places really light me up. But
Mhm.
then I've been to places that are considered to be like the home of Lord Shiva, like the
Mhm.
Himalayas.
Mhm.
And when you get quite deep into the Himalayas, there's not a lot of trees, and
Mhm.
it is very silent, and it's for meditation. You've got like all these
Yeah.
kind of this history of yogis going there to
Mhm.
like meditate and connect with Lord Shiva.
Mhm.
And it you can feel that it's not really a necessarily highly feminine place. It's
Mhm.
like very kind of like quiet and still. Whereas
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, it's
Mhm.
mind-blowingly amazing up there. It's
Mhm.
magical. But for me, I need to be somewhere that is like kind of busy and like full of life, you know, like
Yeah.
I need to like be back in all the trees and the
Mhm.
butterflies. That suits me better as like
Mhm.
very feminine person.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. Like just I'm just opening up to like so many things. Like we talk,
Yeah, I
yeah,
went deep quick.
I love it. Like with the yeah, with the masculine energy being like that stillness and everything because in that same token with the same line of thinking that really puts like femininity and that kind of work into like the gender roles, it also puts like the masculine in these roles too, and like a lot of those are roles that we don't really like or appreciate either. So
Yeah.
I love how when we see the feminine like as movement, it's like the masculine is also that like stillness and that like
Hmm.
that very like stable still, and that's obviously so important and so needed, and also just as much like this sacred energy. Yeah, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think, I mean, this kind of comes with a disclaimer always that we all have masculine and feminine within us,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
like, you know, like just because I'm a woman doesn't mean that I'm like highly feminine, right? So this is like part of it. But I do think that you can kind of feel uh when a man has not kind of integrated his masculine, in
Hmm.
that he's kind of a little bit like all over the place, like his
Yeah.
energy is like not contained. And so I've always used this metaphor as like the pillar. Like if a man is like a pillar, then
Mhm.
like that is hot, you know, because it's like that guy has got like his energy contained, like he knows who
Yeah.
he is, he's confident, he's
Mhm.
grounded, like, and you know, so then I can relax and I can feel safe. And I think this is what a lot of these teachings are kind of taking this concept and running with it,
Mhm.
and then kind of maybe getting a little bit like confused with these gender roles of like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, well, if it's up to the man to like hold space, then it's up to the woman to like do nothing and just be held, and that's not necessarily what it means, you know.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just more a case of like, okay, that dude's got his like masculine
Mhm.
energy integrated, and so
Yeah.
therefore I can trust him to
Mhm.
be like consistent, and I can trust him to, you know, to be able to hold himself.
Mhm. That's really cool because that person, that hypothetical person that you're talking about could be so many different kinds of people with all these different
Yeah.
personality traits and ways of thinking. It's not like, this masculine man, like he is, the leader and, he like, chases
You can
and
fight a bear.
provides and, all of these things. And it's like so in a box. And it's like, no, like he could be like
Yeah.
whatever, but like that, like you said, that healthy, like masculine energy is that pillar. And like he knows himself and is confident in himself. And like
Mm-hmm.
he has that like very like emotional stability and everything like that. And it's
Mm.
like he could act quote unquote, feminine. Like he could have quote unquote
Yeah.
feminine traits. He doesn't have to be the leader. He could be a stay-at-home dad. Whatever these
Mm-hmm.
things are, it could be anything under the sun, but it's authentic to him. Like he knows himself and like is able to really stay like strong and consistent in who he really is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Mhm.
totally. And I mean, if the feminine is wanting to be witnessed, by the masculine, that
Mhm.
happens within us, right? So,
Mhm.
are we witnessing ourselves? Are we witnessing our emotions, or are we
Mhm.
repressing them? Are we
Yeah.
allowing ourselves to kind of to are we allowing ourselves to embody life in all of its facets, or are we kind of like judging or trying to like,
Mhm.
push certain parts of ourselves out?
Yeah.
And so then that kind of like everything is a mirror, right? Like every
Mhm.
relationship that we enter into is a mirror. And so when we are in front of a man who has done that within himself, as in like he has enabled himself to witness all of himself, then he
Mhm.
can do that with you too. And he's not
Yeah.
going to gaslight you. He's not going to like tell you like, hey, you can't feel that, you're too
Mhm.
sensitive, or this, right? Which is, I think, a lot of us have experienced.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like safety, right? In that
Yeah.
you've witnessed yourself,
Mhm.
and not fully, we're all on a journey,
Mhm.
but you've witnessed yourself to a certain point where you are safe to embody your feminine energy within yourself. And so therefore I feel safe because you can
Yeah.
witness me and not try to change me or judge me.
Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. That's so cool. Like, yeah, if they aren't able to like witness and hold that space like for their own feminine energy inside, like their emotions and all and like changes and just all of that, then like how are they supposed to, be able to accept and see you in that way? They haven't accepted that part of themselves. Just like
Mm-hmm.
everything, just like all like parts within ourselves, like how if we're unable to really face them and accept them and work with them like internally, like how would you do that on the outside? This is so amazing how like feminine and masculine is being able to like explain these things, because I feel like I've only had this explained like in other ways, and then feminine and masculine always seem to be like we were talking about, just in this tangent, this whole other direction from what we're saying, where it's like, oh, the guy's not supposed to have emotions and he's cold to his own emotions and he should be like unable to handle yours, you're going to be way too much for him. And like this is literally the opposite of that.
Yeah, this is like radical self-acceptance, on
Yeah.
which is very much the opposite.
Mhm. Oh my gosh, I love it. So I definitely want to talk about goddess work as well. So before we kind of switch gears, is there anything more? I'm sure the feminine will come back up, but is there anything more on your mind that you wanted to speak about this?
I mean, I think that all of this is potentially a reaction to where we've been for the past several hundred, if not a couple of thousand years. Like I always describe everything as being like a pendulum swing. So like if we've been
Yeah.
too far in one direction, we have to go like really extreme into the other direction before we find the center. And
Mhm.
so I think a lot of this stuff is coming out because we have become so aware of like gender stereotypes and how they're not
Mhm.
serving us anymore. And so we kind of have to like I don't know, like experience this kind of like distortion
Mhm.
first before then it's like, oh, actually that's not really working for a lot of us. And a lot of us women that have listened to that narrative, we kind of have to find our way back to the center again.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
Yeah, thank you. That actually brings up something that I definitely wanted to mention too. And like, that was an apprehension of going into like the divine feminine and tapping into that kind of like energy and that kind of like healing work, is that embodying the feminine, thinking about that can be scary when we look at, like you said, everywhere we've come from with like gender roles and everything like that. I know that was something that I was definitely a fear of mine that would creep up whenever I would try to step into this work, is that I was afraid to be seen as more feminine. I was afraid that that meant that I wouldn't be taken seriously, or I would be
mm,
easily like taken advantage of and not heard or walked over, or even just like if I was so radiant in that energy that I would just be like objectified. And that none of that ended up being the case. Is the complete opposite. I feel like way more of a badass and confident, and receive a lot more respect because I have a lot more respect within myself of this energy. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that projection, of how sometimes we think it will be stepping into the feminine?
Um, Yeah, so I mean, it's understandable because we have lived in a world that has told us that feminine energy is weak and has made it so that it has to be almost, right? Where like we couldn't get certain jobs if you're a woman, and you kind of almost had to act masculine in order to get ahead because you were competing against men for the same jobs. And so it's kind of conditioned us to believe that feminine is weak. Um, which again is kind of taken out of the context of the true entirety of the feminine. And when you think about how the feminine is like creation itself, that doesn't seem very weak, right? So I think that this is a natural reaction to our conditioning that we've had, and that's why we're seeing so much popularity of this divine feminine work now, because people are like, actually, we're kind of tired of that narrative. um and has that answered your question? So I lost
Yeah,
my flow.
yeah, it does. I feel like it's the knowing that like it is a whole different narrative, a whole new narrative. Assuming that we're tapping into the divine feminine for what it really is, not the in quotes, what people try to advertise and teach as the divine feminine that is just more gender roles, but going into more of like like Ellie's kind of work and the work that we're talking about is um is not in that same direction that we're coming from. It is so much more of an empowered place, and you can on your in your attributes and in your like interests and like how you show up can be however you are. Like me stepping into this didn't make me any more quote unquote feminine on the outside. Like I still am like super like into sports and athletic and like act in all these quote unquote masculine ways. But I like internally feel so much more confident and authentic and embodied. And like that's the energy that I exude comes from that place. It's not about like outside, it's not about like outside actions, like you could still wear a suit, right? And like be that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, this is actually you've picked up on what I dropped. So
Yeah.
it's there is a difference, right, in the performative feminine that we're seeing quite a
Mm.
lot of, where we're being told that if you kind of are very sultry and you wear certain clothes and you kind of do a lot of deep sighing and you're kind of very like sexual and very open, and that's okay if that's
Yeah.
what somebody wants to do, but
Mhm.
that's not necessarily what we all have to do.
Mhm.
And it can be a way of almost like bypassing a lot of what is the kind of true felt
Mhm.
embodied sense of being feminine, which you touched on, because it's an integration that happens like
Yeah.
within us. It's
Mhm.
not about what you wear or
Mhm.
what you do for a living or what kind of partner you date or any of this. Really, it's very much about how you feel like within yourself.
Mhm.
And so I think you can kind of actually tell who has quite integrated feminine, in that they do feel a safe person to be around and they do feel kind of compassionate and calm. Whereas a lot of uh, this world, and I don't want to be too shady,
Mhm.
but I have gone to a lot of events and a lot of kind of in-person things where I felt kind of that it was not very empowered. It was
Yeah.
kind of competitive,
Mhm.
and that there was a certain look that you had to embody.
Mhm.
And I mean, I'm in Kopanang, which is like very like divine feminine. There's lots of like tantra workshops. There's lots of
Mhm.
like and I don't go to a lot of it. I'll be honest, because of this
Yeah.
problem, right? where
Mhm.
where it's like, oh well, you haven't dressed that way or you haven't acted that way, and therefore you are not divine feminine. and
Mhm.
and then it becomes like a popularity contest almost, of like,
Yeah.
who can be the most feminine, and
Mhm.
like who can look the most like a priestess, or like,
Mhm.
and there is a lot of this online,
Yeah.
which yeah, and like I said, I don't want to be too shady, but a lot
Mhm.
of it is kind of performative and
Mhm.
just continuing on this patriarchal message that women are
Mhm.
meant to look a certain way and that women are meant to be something. And
Mhm.
and also the message that the feminine is only for women, which is not true
Yeah.
either.
Mhm. Yeah, it's so true. Like I even like the more I've been able to embody the divine feminine, like the the more like I don't even like want to wear makeup sometimes, or like I felt like I had to
Mm.
before. Like, and of course, it's everyone's own personal journey, but just saying it doesn't mean that you are even more tied to these like performative
Hmm.
ways. That's a perfect way of putting it. The performative ways of like showing that you're quote unquote feminine. Like the more truly like feminine I've been able to step into, the more I'm like down to wear like super baggy clothes, where before I felt like obligated to like I would put on an outfit and it's like if it didn't show off like the way that my body was in like a good like attractive way, then like
Yeah.
I didn't feel attractive, or I felt like, I wasn't, dressing as like my best self, or if I didn't like put on the makeup or do my
Yeah.
hair. And like I used to not wear glasses outside because I felt like I wasn't pretty when I wore my glasses, like ever since
Yeah.
I've been able to like be in the divine feminine, it's so interesting how all of the quote unquote feminine ways of like showing up physically have totally fallen away, and I just get to do whatever I want, and like I feel even more feminine and just like really baggy, like not cute clothes, no makeup. I've got glasses, and like I'll walk outside and people look at me the same as I do when I'm all dressed up. They look at me like I'm
Hmm.
just as nice or empowered or even cute, which is so funny. I'll tell it to my husband. I'm like, I don't understand why people are acting like I'm just as cute. Like, I didn't used to feel that way before. I'm like, I look I look like a mess right now. But it's just the whole
Yeah,
energy.
but it's your energy, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well because it's like we're kind of going down the path in that this kind of talking about how we should wear certain things and we should act a certain way. We should look, well, you've got to wear makeup and you've got to wear like a figure hugging outfit, if you know,
Hmm.
and that's going down the route of divine feminine for the male gaze,
Yeah.
which is bizarre to me because it's
Yeah.
like, okay, but that isn't isn't that like the complete opposite of
Yeah.
what we're meant to be doing?
Hmm.
And to kind of tie that in with what I was saying before about like, okay, Lord Shiva is the witness and we want to be
Hmm.
witnessed by the masculine, and
Hmm.
it's true, it is
Hmm.
wonderful to be witnessed by the masculine, but that
Hmm.
needs to happen internally
Yeah.
first. It's not an external thing. It's not like if I wear this then I'll be more feminine and then men will find me attractive. Like uh that is not witnessing yourself internally.
Yeah.
Like you said, right? Like if you
Hmm.
feel comfortable
Hmm.
and your glasses and
Hmm.
and your like baggy outfits and you have witnessed yourself internally and you're like, oh yeah, I like accept myself and I've got
Hmm.
this, and you go out, that's hot. That's
Hmm.
so much hotter than
Hmm.
somebody who has said, oh, how do I look in this, and
Hmm.
okay, does this make my waist look too small,
Hmm.
and all of this kind of stuff, and oh well, if I tell him too much
Hmm.
stuff then he's going to think that I'm too
Yeah.
much, right? It's all this
Hmm.
again, too much, not enough, too much, not enough.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
that we've had to struggle with for so long.
Mhm.
So it's kind of just another version of that, really, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah, it really is. And like I love what you brought up because it reminded me like full circle of how we talked about the masculine being like that pillar, and him being able to
Mm.
really witness like his feminine internally makes him able to like do that for you. And then there's just like a healthier connection going on. What you brought up reminds me of how it's like the same, vice versa, where like us within ourselves being able to truly like accept that like we being able to witness ourselves, puts us out in the world. And then like the way that we're being witnessed now, or like the kind of witnessing that we're attracting, like maybe we're like meeting, potential partners and stuff out there in the world, is coming from a much different place. To be able to do that internally first, it's a much different connection. Those are much different people that you are like attracted to and bringing in than if
Mm.
you are just trying to do it the very performative way. Then like you're getting the attention or the looking or whatever it is from like a very very different energy. Like how I noticed that when people think I'm cute, even in my pajamas or whether I'm dressed up, it's in a way that's I very much appreciate. It's in a way that's very respectful, and it's a way where I just feel really like radiant. Like you said, I like you enjoy being witnessed, like I enjoy it. But it's not in a way where like before I was able to really like accept all this within me and have this inner divine feminine going on, it would be in a way where it's not fun, like you're being
Mhm.
checked out
Yeah.
in a way that it's creepy, it's attention you don't want. It's a very, very different energy, and like the people doing it are very, very different energetically, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm,
And I mean, even if we kind of enter relationships in that
mhm,
energy of like, oh, well, you find me attractive and I've tried to make myself attractive for you,
mhm,
it again becomes like performance. And,
mhm,
like I talk about a lot about my journey with people pleasing. And
mhm,
I feel like that very much ties into this, right? Of like trying to be something for somebody. It just ends up with kind of at the beginning you're put on a pedestal and they think, wow, you're so amazing, and then later on when you're like, actually, this is not fully me, then it kind of all just goes wrong, really, doesn't it? Because
yeah,
you're not entering that relationship or that dynamic with a kind of genuine energy, right? You're not genuinely putting yourself out there.
mhm,
So this kind of performative feminine is going to get us down the wrong path anyway,
mhm,
because the kind of people that we attract or the kind of opportunities that we attract are going to be based on the image that we've presented,
mm,
and it might not actually be who we are or what we actually
yeah,
want.
mhm. Wow, yeah, I love that. I love that. So I definitely do, because I'm mindful of time as well. I definitely do
Yeah.
want to switch up gears. I mean, it's in the same topic, but I do want to talk about goddess work because you're someone who has really helped me get into goddess work in a whole different way, which then in turn helped me with like embodying the divine feminine and seeing that from a whole different perspective. That's so much more magical and everything that it should be and really is. But yeah, you're someone who's really helped me with goddess work. I even the other day I was thinking of you because one of the goddesses I work with is Aphrodite. And in Greek mythology, and I'm sure other cultures as well, the god or the goddess like doesn't just like represent that thing, like they are that thing
Yeah.
personified, like
Yeah.
Poseidon is like literally the ocean. So I was feeling like down. I was feeling kind of like depressed and anxious. And then I like called in Aphrodite. And then when I called in Aphrodite, I realized she is love and beauty. Like she's not just showing
Mm.
love and beauty, she is love and beauty. So like then I just felt this whole weight lifted off of me, and everything I looked at was so beautiful. And like I was so present, and like it made me so happy. And I just noticed her everywhere. I noticed like the tree and so anyway, like a lot of being able to have this kind of goddess work stemmed from learning from you, because in my past I like learned from a place that wasn't the best. So I definitely appreciate the work that you do, and I'd love to hear, your thoughts on goddess work, wherever you want to start.
Ooh. Oh, okay. So first of all, thank you. That's very nice
Yeah.
feedback.
Mhm.
Um, so I got into goddess worship. Like I said, I was in India and Nepal, and I was going through a big breakup, and was just by myself. I kind of broke up with somebody and was just in India by myself. And so it was for me like a form of like throwing myself into something where I felt held.
Mhm.
And I feel like for a lot of us, particularly for women, we kind of need some sort of like guidance
Mhm.
sometimes because of like all of the conditioning and all of the like trauma that we've been through. That goddess worship is a way of, like you said, like tapping into something that's bigger than us, that can hold us and can support us and can guide us. And so then we get to feel like safe, I
Mhm.
think. And so
Mhm.
for me, goddess worship started as like something for me to like surrender to and feel like, okay, I don't have to know everything. I don't have to make all the decisions. I can just like literally like put my hands up and be like, lead me.
Mhm.
And so I spent like several years traveling around following signs, which sounds like madness. And a lot of my friends thought that it was at the time. Like, what do you mean you're going there because of a sign from the goddess? What are you talking about? You know, but
Yeah.
for me, it was like just a way of like not having to have so much responsibility all the time, because I had been, an overgiver, codependent. I was, in a relationship with an addict. And so, there was like so much weight on my shoulders. And so when I turned to the goddess in whatever form, it was like, yeah, I'm like taken care of. I
Yeah.
can just follow something and give myself to something
Mhm.
and feel supported.
Yeah, that's so cool because I feel like the way that you get there is so authentic. Whereas in the past, like I've learned that when like work with a goddess, like you're supposed to, be like in receiving mode and all of these things. And I would try to like make myself in receiving mode. But what you were saying and like what my journey was as well, it's like you connect with the goddess and like like you said, you like kind of throw your hands up and you're like, I am ready to be like helped and supported. And like through that, you end up trusting, and you end up receiving. And it comes in like a more authentic way instead of like forcing yourself. You're like, okay, so I'm supposed to be like the receiver, like, but forcing yourself to receive is so counter productive because like receiving is the trust and allowing. So yeah, I love
Mhm.
the way that you described that and how you did that and then you were able to follow her around and live your life that way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And I always come back to this idea that the goddess is like the divine mother. And so
Mm-hmm.
if it's our mother, then like you can't do any wrong. And I mean there's something in the Bhagavad Gita where Lord Krishna says like if you come to me like covered in mud, like I'll still accept you.
Oh,
Like it's basically like God, goddess, divine, whatever you want to call it, will always accept you no matter how you come.
mhm.
So this kind of idea, it makes it a lot easier for us to just be like, okay, well, I can tell divine all my secrets. I
Mhm.
demand stuff sometimes I'm really bratty about it, and I'm just like, I want this thing now, why haven't you given it to me yet? And then
Yeah.
I'm like, later on I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, okay,
Uh,
here's some chocolate, like, I behaved like a brat. But like it is like a mother, right? Like there's something that's bigger than me, and I am in constant communication with it, and I don't have to filter myself
Mhm.
or censor myself,
Yeah.
because it's God, it's goddess. Like,
Yeah.
we are like a little divine kind of child.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I think that that's like a nice way to ease yourself into devotion, because if there's too many rules,
Mhm.
then it's very hard to have faith. It's very hard to like have devotion, because it's like, again, like coming back to this idea of the feminine, like, oh, only if you do this, 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 and this are you
Mhm.
accepted.
Yeah.
Which just perpetuates the performance and perpetuates the people pleasing and the inauthenticity and the self-rejection,
Mhm.
which is the opposite path, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah, because like goddess devotion has totally helped me with my healing of just like childhood wounds of like, being like
Mhm.
bad or like being afraid of being punished.
Yeah.
And then also my like religious wounding with that same thing, because like that is how the divine was seen as kind of this all like punishing. There's all these right and wrong ways to do things. So it was so healing for me to come to what you were saying as like feeling this like unconditional mother, that it's like every thought in my head, like every action that I do, or even if I come right like all upset, it's like, why isn't this happening? Like that all of this is, I am still held, I'm still accepted, I'm supported, like nothing can change that.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
really healed all of those like really big like punishment kind of rules.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think that that is like the journey of devotion. Like at first, we kind of feel a little bit silly and we're like, okay, I'll give it a go. And then after a while, it starts to get exciting. And then after a while, you're just like, oh no, I'm just completely safe in this world, and like,
Yeah.
you know, as much as I'm still going to have the same kind of complaints, and you know, I'm going to get bratty sometimes and be like, why isn't my life how I want it to be right now, you know? And it's not that you have I don't know, I mean, you are blessed and you do have a lot of magic and miracles in your life, but like you still struggle, right? But it's like the knowledge that you're always going to be held in the struggle.
Yeah.
And that's why I really like dark feminine work, and you know, work with the dark goddesses like Kali and Lilith and Inanna, is because, you know, when you go through a dark time, it's like, oh well, this is okay, I'm just in the time of, you know, the dark goddess, I'm going to be held, goddess Kali will lead me through it, you know. And we don't reject the suffering, or we don't reject the sadness or whatever we've got going on within us as human beings, because it's always
Yeah.
going to come, right?
Yeah, that's so cool because like it really puts you know, the goddesses and this kind of spiritual work like in that unconditional ness for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
because I think there's so many ways that that it's already conditional, and then there's a lot of spiritual like work and teachings that really make it even more so conditional, like, you know, that avoids the bad times, and like it must all be good. We're trying to make it all good. We're trying to make it all amazing and perfect all the time. And no, we want to be happy all the time and like good vibes only. But if it's truly that like divine, you're held, you're supported, that kind of like connection, then yes, there's, you know, there's struggles and there's pain and there's all of these things, and that's all okay, and you're held through it, and you're able to accept it, and you're able to look upon, like how you're saying, you know, certain goddesses or different entities that like that's what they do, and like that's what they're here for. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. Um, yeah, I think that's so cool because I know that, like I mentioned, I've learned through Money Medium with you, and that really helped me with the concept of like the underworld, and then just also other types of goddesses and entities that aren't necessarily like what you would just see as like, oh, it's like light and beautiful, you know, it's like the
Mhm.
harder things that are so put as like bad or evil, or like we want to avoid it, you know, in society, and not seen as like
Mm.
it's just like a natural part of life, you know, so there's no point in trying to like not have pain ever, or like not ever die, you know, like things that are just
Yeah.
such like a part of life, and they don't
Yeah.
have to be like quote unquote bad or anything at all. So yeah, it's really amazing how like goddess devotion can help bring us through accepting all these different aspects of life in a way that really like calms our nervous system, to be honest. Like that's how
Mhm.
I feel with
Yeah.
it. Yeah, like there's just like this
Yeah.
underlying calm where like even if I'm stressed, even if there's shit going on, even if like I'm overwhelmed, whatever it is, it's not like those things disappear forever, but like there's this baseline underneath of just like, I'm okay. It's okay. I'm supported. This all
Mhm.
passes. Yeah, that being held instead of like going through that and not being held and feeling like you're flailing or drowning, right? It's so different to go through something and like be held while you're going through it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this is why we're seeing like this return of the feminine, and
Mhm.
people being very interested in goddess worship. And you know, you can see it all across the internet, right? Like it's really a big thing that's happening. And I
Yeah.
don't think that that's just because it's trending. I think that that is like a genuine need that we have in our society to kind of go back to a way of accepting the things that come with the feminine. And if you think about the kind of things like childbirth and death, and these are all like things that come under goddess worship feminine, right? But they are things that are quite a little bit taboo almost, right? Like they can be gruesome, they can be they can be shocking, they can be uncomfortable, they can be painful, they can be traumatic. And so as a society, we've like tucked them under the rug and gone like, oh no, these are things that, you know, we don't want to talk about menstruation, we don't want to talk about death, we don't want to talk about you know, sadness and all of those things, right? So we'll just kind of like tuck them under, and we'll focus on this kind of very masculine god, right? Which, you know, I could go off on a tangent here, but like the monotheistic gods of like you know, just having one, and it's a masculine god, and so we're all focused on ascension, and we're all focused on like, okay, how do we rise above the material, how do we rise above our bodies, how do we rise above childbirth and death and pain, and you know, all of this stuff that's like very human. And so in that, we have kind of like rejected a lot of ourselves, and then told ourselves that like, you know, oh well, I'm wrong and I have to be kind of like perfect and love and light and presentable. But the feminine at its core is not presentable. It's like, yeah, it's wild and unkept and chaotic and dark and challenging, and you know. And so when we return to the feminine, which is what we're seeing, it's like we return and we reclaim all of those things, and we're like, I'm not going to repress all those things anymore. I'm not going to like, you know, tell myself that I'm wrong for having pain, or I'm wrong for going through a depression, or you know, that I can't talk about these things, these bodily things, you know, I can't be a body. So I think that it is a very healing thing that we're seeing in society, but it's definitely going to be very confronting because of the things that it contains. And that's why I think that a lot of what we've talked about with the kind of performative feminine is like, if you haven't got like the blood, guts and gore, then it's not the feminine, you know.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it. That's like, oh yeah, if you don't have like you know, the blood, guts and gore, the ugly crying, like
Right.
you know, then you don't have the feminine. You're blowing my mind so much, because like you're showing me how much I've been doing feminine work the whole time and not knowing that that's what it truly was, because my whole thing is like, you is like bringing like spiritual like empowerment and spiritual gifts, but like knowing that like you can't fully get anywhere without like looking at like things like the subconscious and your human experience, and like working with all of these things, like getting, you know, getting into it, like going into like the blood, guts and gore, like you were saying, like you can't just try to rise. You're not gonna get anywhere with just that. Like they work so hand in hand together. And like all of that needs to be, you know, seen and like worked with and loved and accepted, and like, you know, walked forward with together. Don't just try to leave it behind, push it to the side, you know, get rid of it, kill it off. So that's so interesting that you just described what I've been doing forever, like in my work, and I never saw it as feminine work. So that's super cool, and just super validating personally that I've been called more and more to this kind of work, because I'm already doing it.
I think that could a lot of us can say that, right? And that's why this kind of like gatekeeping attitude of like, well, you know, if you wear this, and if you behave like this, and if you do like this, that's being feminine. It's like taking it outside of us, where we already know how to do these things. Like it's already very intuitive, like you said, right? Like a lot of the stuff that I talk about, even astrology, actually, a lot of the time when I talk about astrology, like I'll have a friend be like, oh yeah, I just did this, and this, and I'm like, that is totally aligned with the astrology that's going on right now. And they'll be like, I didn't know. It's like, we already know, right? Like we're already doing the work. We're already always doing the work, whatever the work is. I don't know if I like the phrase the work. I might have to change that, you know, because it's not work. It's just being, right?
The experience.
We're already doing the experience. So like when you get told from like I guess very conscious kind of like model, then you kind of go, oh okay, well I'm already doing that. I'll just do it a little bit more.
Yes, exactly. Like I'll lean into it, and like now with the awareness, like you can just really get a lot more like hands on with it, you know, and like dive into it. which is so awesome. So speaking of diving into it, I know that we're going to be wrapping up. So is there anything that you want to share or leave people with as far as you know, like goddess devotion goes, or even going back to like divine feminine energy? Is there maybe like a practice, or just, you know, some final thoughts on how to kind of be more aware of this journey and take some steps on it?
Okay. So I would say that the most important thing that you can do is come back into your body, because especially for women, because we have a whole kind of generation, several generations of people that are dissociated and disconnected from our bodies, and it kind of goes hand in hand with the feminine, because if the feminine is movement and we're not really embodied, we're not really moving, and we're not really inhabiting our body, then we are not really connected to our feminine energy, and you know, a little bit disempowered, and that's when we start kind of being able to not able to when things can condition us, when we can be manipulated, when we can be like kind of like moved towards the narrative of somebody else. And so when you come back into your body by moving it, and you know, there isn't really any right way of moving your body, it's just, you know, dance, stretch, jump, move, you know, just get in that body, then to me that is a way of connecting with the goddess. And so I have developed a practice where I actually channel through that as well. So I like invite the goddess, like, please move through me and give me guidance. And so then when I kind of do this embodiment practice, then I actually receive guidance of like, okay, now do this in your business, or, you know, now go to this place, or, you know, here's a vision of something that you could do next. And so it really does open you up to healing, to channeling, to devotion, connecting with the goddess. So yeah, for me, I think number one thing would be get back into your body, because like we said, it has been completely like overlooked and disconnected from. And so yeah, that I think is probably the most powerful thing that people can do.
Yeah, perfect. I'm like, I'm ready. I'm like, I'm gonna start doing that in
Let's
my
go.
morning instead of just like channeling like still. Like I'm like, well, I gotta be moving now. I'm so into it. Awesome.
Yeah, it totally works.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, cool. So we're gonna be headed out, but I definitely want to let Ellie share where you can find her, what she's got going on, how you can work with her on these things, how you can learn from her. So go ahead, let us know.
So I do coaching, and I use astrology, embodiment, goddess worship. These are like my modalities. And I have a business coaching coven, I like to call it, because we are a group of very magical women working on businesses. That's called Wild Feminine Leadership. And so I teach this embodiment practice to channel guidance on how to run your business, which I find to be a much more freeing way of doing entrepreneurship, right? Is like, I always say, goddess is my business mentor.
Yeah.
And so I teach people how to do that. And that goes hand in hand with, at the moment, I am running a class on how to make memes and how to channel the collective. So how to kind of like find your unique energetic signature and kind of read the collective and do it in like a divination kind of way. So I have that going on at the moment. And I will open my readings again, I think probably early next year.
Awesome. How fun. Okay, I'm so excited. You guys definitely have to check out what she just mentioned, like the wild feminine leadership and the prophetic memes. I've looked at them both and they seem so cool. And if you check out Ellie's page, like you know, she is the person for this. As you obviously channeled it, you know, like these programs picked you. But yeah, I'll have that all in
Yes.
the show notes. Yeah, I'll have it all in the show notes for everyone. And then with me, I'll put my socials on there as well. I have my one-on-one coaching open. That was the only thing that I somewhat mentioned on here. So that'll just be like what I'll put as my link. I do a lot of like subconscious reprogramming work to help really align your conscious desires, what's truly meant for you, what you really want, and actually make it happen because you're getting into what's going on subconsciously that's holding you back and making sure that it's not happening, and everything that just really wants to be seen and worked with hand in hand instead of ignored and forced and tried to drag along into where you're trying to go. So that's what I do. And yeah, thank you so much, Ellie, for being here. This was so fun.
Thank you for having me. This was a really nice conversation. I'm feeling
Yeah.
very inspired.
Oh, good. Yes, you're gonna have a great day too. Awesome. Well, to everyone listening, thank you so much for being here, and I hope you all have a sunny day. Thank you for tuning in to the Sunny Days podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and catch more of my free content by following me at Alex the Good Witch on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. If this episode resonated with you, please take a screenshot, post it in your stories, and tag me on Instagram. I appreciate your time here with me today. Peace and love to you all, and I will see you in the next episode.